time on a Monday with Bruce Hawker, political strategist, and Richard Alston, former Liberal Cabinet Minister. Good morning to you both. Richard, let me come to you first of all. Two polls out today. Both of them roughly agree with each other. Good news for Labor, bad news for the coalition.
Yes, I think broadly that's right. Certainly bad news for Kevin Rudd as well. You've got to put these things into perspective. You never expect the polls to be widely apart when you get to an election, so it's always going to tighten up. Having said that, I think this is a reflection of the fact that Labor's basically adopting opposition-light policies on carbon tax and on asylum seekers, but there's a long way to go. I think the fact is that they're making a lot of promises, but will they be affordable? I don't think so. Yeah, well, but do people look at it that closely? I have a funny feeling that the average person doesn't look at it that closely.
Just very quickly, Richard, the Australian is saying that Labor is now, for the first time in a long while, being seen as electorally competitive. Do you agree with that?
Well, 50-50 says that, yes. Does that mean in 12 months' time they will be seen in the same way? I think it's sort of a mini honeymoon, if you like, but as I say, the polls will narrow anyway, so
you can't call it a honeymoon.
We can expect more of the same.
You can't call it a honeymoon this late. No one has a second honeymoon.
Maybe it's a second honeymoon.
Bruce, do you agree? Is Labor now, I mean, it's that sort of turn in public mood, electorally competitive, all of a sudden they're in the race?
Well, on those polls, absolutely. And I think a lot of it's got to do with state issues. In the last week or two, we've seen Queensland and New South Wales leaders come out with some pretty horrendous policies as far as public employment goes.
And Labor are playing those quite cleverly.
And Labor's playing that, and they're saying, well, this is the sharp distinction between us and them. And Joe Hockey, of course, came out and said that there'll be 12,000 jobs cut. So for the first time in a while, Labor's got something to play with.
All right, let's talk Kevin Rudd just very quickly, because this doesn't look good for Kevin Rudd. Still, he's polling well. He's polling better than Julia Gillard, but with Julia Gillard on the ascension, it's less likely that he's going to be beseeched to take over. What is he going to do? This could be his last hurrah.
Oh, well, I think Kevin's been pretty constant in what he's been saying. Certainly in recent times, he's throwing his shoulder to the wheel. He's been taking the fight up to Campbell Newman in Queensland, as I said.
But isn't that got a lot to do with him saying, don't forget me, guys, ask now, I'm all ready, I'm ready to go?
Yeah, I think he's just saying, look, everybody's got to be fighting a common enemy here, and that's what he's been doing.
Richard, does Bruce know more than he's letting on, do you think?
Well, I think you have to say he's a rusted-on Rudd supporter, so he's always going to put the most charitable interpretation on Rudd's
I don't think Kevin Rudd does anything without checking it out with you first, Bruce.
No.
Well, I think Rudd's interventions are very selective, I think you have to say.
Let's just have a close look at Bruce's face now, because I think his face is saying more than his words.
Look, I honestly think that this is very good news for the government, but I think anybody on the government side would be saying now, look, let's have a look at the polls again in 2 weeks and a month's time.
Let's wait and see whether this is a sustainable trend.
There's a lot of things have happened in the last 2 weeks.
Just very quickly, Tony Abbott, should he be worried about Malcolm Turnbull's ratings in these polls?
He should. I think Tony Abbott's big plus has always been that he's been able to drag down the government's positive appeal. Now that that's not working either, he hasn't got very much room to play with, and I think I'd be very concerned.
All right, Bruce Hawker and Richard Alston, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll have Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz.
Bruce's face now. Look at his face. He knows more than he says.